We go now to Mr. Jeff Duncan of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to just take a few minutes to point out some of the taxpayer dollars that have been sent to Afghanistan and spent almost wastefully. And I would like to put an article from Bloomberg News in the record about planes parked in the weeds in Kabul after $486 million were spent. These are G-222 aircraft, some of which are sitting in the weeds, not being used. Those are taxpayer dollars that were spent to purchase those. We also spent somewhere between $25 and $36 million on a 64,000 square foot unoccupied building in Camp Leatherneck, which May of 2010, the commanding general, General Mitchell, recommended cancellation of the construction, and that was overridden by his superiors. And then in May 2013, the building's still sitting not used. The Army Regulation 15-6 investigation said we ought to convert that building to a gymnasium and spend more money converting it to a movie theater. That was overridden. The building's still sitting unoccupied. Thank goodness we didn't spend any more money. $230 million in spare parts in an inventory warehouse. There was no good inventory or accountability for those spare parts. These are vehicle parts. And an additional $138 million in spare parts were ordered just in October of 2013. I want to commend the work of Congressman Jason Chaffetz of the Oversight Committee, who's been working with the Special Investigator of Afghan Reconstruction, the CIGAR. He's identified fuel usage and waste and theft in Afghanistan. He's talked about the expenses of the hospital in Kabul, where U.S. tax dollars have been wastefully spent. We could go into the Bank of Kabul fiasco and allocation of dollars there, but infrastructure projects that are all over Afghanistan and there's no oversight. These are in areas that are inaccessible to civilian employees. And I would like to point out, and I know the panelists are aware of this, but this is the Afghan Oversight Access in 2009. The shaded areas are areas that civilian contractors or U.S. employees have access to in 2009 to do oversight on U.S. taxpayer dollars being spent. If I flip over to the projected 2014 oversight areas, you'll notice a stark contrast. I know it's difficult to see, but these gentlemen are aware of this. They're just little dots there. These are areas that U.S. inspectors do not have access to for oversight. These are U.S. dollars. How much more money are we going to continue to spend in Afghanistan without proper oversight? And that's really what it's about. So I don't have any questions along those. I could go through a lot of other examples, but I think the American taxpayers that are watching understand that their tax dollars are being spent without a lot of oversight on part of their government. So I'd like to shift gears to Ambassador Dobbins. I think that's who I would address this to, but I'm interested in the special immigrant visa program and the delays that are going on there, because Congress has recognized the unique dangers faced by Iraqi and Afghan civilians who worked on behalf of the U.S. government by creating programs for these individuals to become lawful permanent residents here in the U.S. I've had an example of a gentleman I met in the Kandahar, the Kandahar region of Afghanistan about 2 years ago. He was embedded with the military there, had acted as a translator, had taken up weapons to help defend the colleagues of the unit he was working with, and he was definitely threatened by the Taliban. His uncle was killed, other family members were threatened, and went through a 2-year process where officers from the unit that he was embedded with, other folks that knew this gentleman vouched for his service to America there in Afghanistan, but yet it took over 2 years. He was actually issued a visa by the State Department, and then it was revoked right before he left. And had to go through months of trying to understand why it was revoked, and it was reissued. I think it was reissued only after Congress got involved questioning why. But so I asked, why have there been so many delays in the Afghan SIVs, Ambassador? And I'm assuming you're the right one to ask that question of.
No, I think that's right, sir. I think we were slow in the early years to implement this program. Over the last year, however, it's accelerated significantly. I think there's more visas issued this year than there were a year ago. And in fact, we're approaching the limit of the program. We'll run out of numbers shortly, and we'll want to work with Congress for an extension of the program, since there will be additional people who will qualify if we have additional numbers. On specific cases, I mean, we have to determine that they did work for the U.S. military. We have to determine that they are under threat. That depends in part on where they live. And there are other security-related concerns. I can't explain any particular case. I know the case that you're referring to, and within, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even less, of the visa denial, it was then reissued, as you indicated.
And I appreciate the assistance on that and got the gentleman here. Mr. Chairman, I did want to put this in the record.